Greetings, everyone. This is Virtuous Roots, where we reclaim virtue to bring it to our home and yours. And I'm Thomas McCuddy.
And I'm Thomas Quackenbush.
And I'm Nick Wiegand. And today's discussion is what role does perseverance play in family life and how can it be developed? I think as a parent, we watch our children probably fail at this more often. And that's when we seem to start to notice that there's a lack of perseverance, right? It's not one of those things that I think that we just identify. So before we begin, before I go into the scripture, like I need to understand perseverance, what it is in the first place, and then how does it line up with the virtues that we have been talking about?
So, fortitude is the virtue where you seek the good when it's difficult to achieve. So, this is going to be your fight or flight. And so, really, fortitude has two aspects. You have an assertiveness, the going forward, and you have an endurance, being able to ride something out for the long haul. So perseverance falls under that endurance aspect of fortitude. So it's the kind of thing where, unlike when you have to engage or take courage and make something happen, perseverance is going to be that external, being able to handle the pressures and deal with those things. It's different from patience. Patience is more of an aspect of mind. It's your settled soul while you're going through difficult things. So that's why you can actually persevere without patience. Okay. But even if you have patience and the body's not able to endure, you're not going to persevere. So this is why in talking about perseverance and understanding, it's a long game. It's going to necessarily require lengthy times. You usually don't persevere in something short. You can handle and you can endure something for a short period of time.
It's a sprint.
Yeah. Perseverance is going to be your marathon. Can't microwave it. Going to take a while. And the reality for parents that a lot of parents probably don't want to hear is that in order to cultivate perseverance in the kids, the parents themselves have to have perseverance as a quality, because you have to have perseverance in order to teach perseverance. Because when you have somebody who does not wish to persevere, they want to give up, they want to take the short road, they're complaining, they're whining, whatever they're going to do, they're bargaining. That happens a lot of times. Like, hey, I'll do this, and we'll get out of that. As a parent, you have to in some ways have that quality from the get-go in order to help instill that.
I think the parents who listen to this show are going to get tired of hearing how inadequate they are. And I say that because, as a parent, like once you start really kind of, engaging in these ideas, you do start to identify your own shortcomings. Yes. And so you're absolutely correct. Like we have to set that example across the board with every.
And I'm
not
saying all parents don't have it. I'm simply saying.
I know you're not, but
we got to recognize
when we start. Yeah, all of our children are going to be a reflection of us on a regular basis. And so how do we? So let me read James 1:12, and I'm going to ask my question. James 1:12 reads, "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. For when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him." I know there's a minor differences between steadfastness and perseverance, but I think it's key. Do you have to persevere through something that's good? Or is perseverance always something that is tough and hard and sometimes even bad?
Well, I think you're pointing to the good. I mean, that has to be the object of your pursuit. I mean,
when I say I mean the popular term, like, oh, I really like this thing.
Oh, you enjoy it?
Yeah.
I think there could be like, all right, I gotta, like, we talked a little bit about sprinting. A lot of people can sprint and you can like run, but for short distances. But if you want to actually I run a few miles like every other day, and getting to that point of actually enjoying that, because it's still perseverance, even as because I'm always trying to go further. I'm trying to go faster. I'm trying to improve my stamina. And so there's always going to be this push. But there was a point where, like, when my body, like, because I'm getting all the feedback when I started out, or if I haven't ran for a month, I get all this feedback where my body doesn't want to do it. It's like my lungs, you're out of breath and your heart's racing and you're getting sweaty. and you're all this biofeedback is telling you not to be doing what you're doing because you don't like it. It's not fun initially. But if you it's a psychological thing. As we talk about fortitude, I'm like, if I actually want to be a distance runner, or if I want to run a marathon, or if I want to do any type of endurance sport, you have to like overcome those, like kind of like tell your body that you're gonna just basically you're gonna have to get through this because it's gonna get better. And I think once you get to a certain point, I feel like you're going like a roller coaster. You're going to the top, and eventually you get there. And even though you're going to be going, it's going to be a lot easier, and you're going to be finding pleasure in the activity as because then you become a runner. This becomes part of your routine. This becomes part of who you are. That perseverance, I think, taught like running and being a distance runner. It taught me this in a very, very visceral and very kind of bodily way, because I'm like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. I take that same type of idea now that I have achieved it in running, and I apply it to other aspects of my life, other things I want to achieve, knowing that going through it, say if you want to read a difficult novel, or you want to learn philosophy, or if you want to learn, whatever, that in order to achieve that good or whatever you're trying to achieve, you're going to have to go through something, because then like kind of like that, the common phrase is like, nothing worth anything is like easy. You have to kind of work for it. That's even like how the kind of the curse, we look back in Adam and Eve, and it's the God cursed the ground, and now it's by the sweat of the brow that we're going to have to like, harvest our produce and make food, and it's going to be difficult, but through that process we learn skills and we grow. And I think you talk about when in that passage you read, having joy through trials, because knowing that even though you're going through a trial, that if you stay, get steadfast, and you're going to achieve this perseverance, that's going to be the fruit of whatever you're trying to endure. So
state that question one more time.
Yeah.
That you asked.
So do we persevere? Do we have to persevere? Is there anything we ever persevere through? I said something that's good, but I don't mean it as in like the good,
mhm.
Right.
but like something pleasurable, something you like.
So
It
that
doesn't feel as if that would be perseverance.
that's yeah. So I see where Thomas was going with that, but there is that sense. I know what you're getting at. So to kind of unravel that, because what's happening is, if you have something that causes you pleasure, like I said, you don't persevere through pleasure. The perseverance is not to let that pleasure become corrupted such that what was good is now bad, even though it might feel good. Okay, so too much of a good thing. So this is why when you have too much of a good thing, you have the excess, you're into vice. Okay, so this is why food is good. I enjoy eating. The perseverance in some ways is holding back from that food so I don't overeat, or I don't eat the wrong things, or sometimes, like
That would be temperance.
it is temperance, but again, fortitude and all things fortitude are achieving the good when they're difficult.
Okay.
So that's why what draws me to the food is a simple pleasure, which is initially a temperance issue. And choosing the right amount of portion, to not be gluttonous, that is a temperance issue. But this is where I give credence to people if this becomes difficult for them, like I really want that
The ice
pie.
cream.
Or ice cream. Okay.
Yeah.
I really want that thing. Okay. Know my audience. Okay. There becomes, you watch this, I think, with children, like they struggle.
Right.
And so when they have that struggle, the perseverance, you never struggle towards what is actually good. Your perseverance is going to be, I think, to keep what you're doing on that straight path, on that narrow path, to keep it where it's good. Because if it's truly good, you should always be striving for it. But I think some of the blending of some of these virtues, like I said, if our pleasures are so disordered that we're just drawn, I think it's some nature of the way addiction happens, like addiction with like whether it's video games. That would
anything.
be
There's so many options
that would be one that I would throw into this temperance category, because I think we'd agree that's not necessarily like a biochemical issue. That's not like the kind of thing like
I don't like this. I don't like video games.
Okay,
example.
all right.
Let's move on to something that's adult.
So, well, there are many adults who struggle with this. Okay, so that's
I'm sorry.
again, yes, but
I'm not sorry, but
okay. Well, and well, to be clear, I like video games. So anyone who's out there who just got upset, now it doesn't. I get it. We're in different places with this, but this is why. So
mine was a genuine question.
Right.
It's not, and so what I hear you saying, and I'm gonna let you finish, but Thomas is like, oh, running's terrible, and so I just persevere through it until I like it. Well, then you're not persevering anymore once you like it. But then you bring up the other side of it of saying, okay, yes, perseverance can include the pleasures, but it's holding back on something that may be pleasurable. So it's interesting because I never thought about it that way. Is that you do have to persevere through holding back on keeping it straight and narrow, keeping it in the good. So perseverance, it can kind of encompass everything. It's not just like life doesn't just have to be bad to be able to persevere. Is that we can even persevere when things are going well. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
It is, but I want to offer a corrective because even Thomas, when he's running and he likes the running, there is still some element to get that going. There's still some element of continuing because you're not always that way. Sometimes, you get in the rhythm or whatever.
If it's
you just
raining
have your days.
out, or if it's it just there's times it just being as a runner and as a 42-year-old runner, I don't get I have good running days and I have bad running days. There's days where I feel like I've conquered the world, and there's other days where I feel like I've just hurt my body, where I'm going to go home and I'm going to have to sit in a bath.
I was in the Army for a long time, and I ran a lot, and I never liked it. So this is a really hard example for me to get on board with.
That's why I think it's appropriate, because out there, I'm sure there's listeners who like to do this and can understand that. But even so, because it is a difficult task, and I think that's why, as it comes to perseverance, there is a good that we're kind of trying to achieve, whether it be health or just physical physique or whatever. But yeah.
But here's why this conversation is so important for a family listening to this, because we're discussing things that all three of us respond very differently to.
True, yeah.
That's true too.
So when it comes to video games, when it comes to running,
ice cream,
and ice cream,
that was mine. Yeah.
Your ice cream, okay.
Yeah.
But there's things where, like, I like ice cream, but I'm not drawn to it like that. Mine would be cherry pie. But we talk about video games. That's not something that's going to draw you.
No.
Like, you're like, okay, no, running is not going to draw me. Like, that's one of those things where I'd be the same way. Like, even if I did it like professionally, like I had to, at no point would I actually enjoy that. So I think the reason this is so important for a family to hear this is because you're going to have people with very different dispositions, very different senses of what makes them happy and where they derive pleasure. And that's why I think a lot of families don't understand each other. They're like, they're like, this is not my issue, or I don't understand. How could you possibly enjoy doing that?
How can you possibly enjoy it? But then, we have fathers trying to turn their children into them,
right,
and not understanding why they can't get it, or why they just can't do it, or why they or how can someone do that? I think you're really kind of keying in on something important here,
and that's why perseverance. And so this is a tricky statement. I was asked, are virtues objective? And the answer is yes. There are objective ideas and qualities, but there is a sense that
they ride on the backbone of like objective truth. Right?
Objective truth,
so,
right?
Yes.
But there is a sense in which they are relative to the object. Truth always corresponds to the object. So this is why, when it comes to a great example, it goes back to exercise. A person who works a desk job in an office is going to need to get a lot more exercise and hit that gym a lot more than somebody who is actually a professional farmer and is out in the field working all day long.
Mm-hmm.
The farmer does not need a gym membership usually because they are already doing those kinds of things. The same thing goes back to what is gluttonous.
Wait, let me extend. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So when you have gluttony, when you have somebody who works a desk job, and they're not getting the exercise, they're going to need a much lower caloric intake. They're going to need to eat different kinds of food versus somebody who it was The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. He published his diet, and a guy actually went on that, and he said, I've never forced myself to eat food like this in my life. There was so much food, but that's because his workout regime was so intense. That's what was required. And it wasn't gluttonous for Dwayne Johnson to
'Cause he's
eat
just
that amount of food
huge.
because of the amount of work he's
Mhm.
doing. So that's why.
Hold on, before you go further, I want to roll back to the exercise.
Mhm.
Right. So, um, I do biblical counseling. I do a lot of counseling. Well, one of the ways in which we flee God, or someone can flee God, is through exercise. And so they can take that good thing
Mhm.
and they can make it such a part of their life to where it becomes
Mhm.
used. It's the right thing. Like health is good, is there for the right. It's good in the way that it is healthy. But when we're doing it for the wrong reasons and to an excess, where we're using it to flee God, or we're using it to, disordered loves, right? Where
Mhm.
we're using it to avoid other things in our life, it is the exact same thing
Yep,
that then is now
absolutely.
being used for the wrong reasons. So we like, again, the same idea, but across the board, it can be great, it can hurt, but then it can also become something that is then really kind of detrimental to our lives.
I had a problem when I was really, really into running. Like I would actually get depressed and anxious when I see people running, and I was like driving my car. I'm like, I need to be out there. Like it would actually cause me like, I'm like, I need to be out there. Like I had this like kind of had, and just having the shame if I don't like perform as high as standard I want to, like all those things, like as I'm growing into my 40s, recognizing that I have limitations and being okay with that, like kind of tempering down my enthusiasm and my desire to do, whatever I was trying to achieve at that time, and recognizing my limitations, because it's so easy, because now we've overcome, like, I'm going to continue to overcome, and then you're going to you kind of get this kind of addictive you can get addicted to this kind of feeling like you can be godlike in some sense.
Well, you're describing gluttony, just not
Yeah, it's just in the other
just not a gluttony of food.
Yep,
It's
gluttony of
it's too much of something.
Yep, exactly.
I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. So all of this goes back, and the initial question was dealing with perseverance. So the reason I bring it back to, you have to understand, again, as a runner, you're going to need a different amount of food. So when we talk about perseverance and what it means to cultivate perseverance, you need to start with the person where they're at. Because if you have somebody who is by disposition, in other words, by nature, like they just, you recognize some children are more fearful than others. Some children seem to have more of that ability to persevere, which actually could come from a place of stubbornness rather than perseverance. So
that's true.
It's important as we look to persevere, and kind of like we've been talking, always identify first, what is the good we're pursuing? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Because even this was actually one of the mistakes I made. So again, as it relates to health, when I was about ninth grade of school, that summer before my ninth grade, I decided to go on a diet, and it was almost like extreme dieting, to the point where my parents actually got upset with me. They were like, "You're not eating enough." And I was like, all my life, I was the big kid. And all of a sudden, I'm like, how could this be bad? I'd become so obsessed with it that, it wasn't so much counting calories, but it was like every bite, I had gone to this excess.
You feel like you're guilty for every bite.
And so that's why there's so many things that need to be measured in terms of what I didn't understand too. Like I had my ideal weight, and even doctors today, they tell me like what my weight is. My wife will tell them that's unhealthy for him. My frame doesn't hold that. I'm too big of a frame, and that needs to be taken into consideration. It never is. And so that's with weight and health, but all these things, when it comes to our character, what kind of person do you have? What is your child like? Who are you? And understanding who you're dealing with. I think that's overlooked. We want to solve it with a formula rather than dealing with the individual people.
So I think it's the dieting thing. When you have parents that are a parent that is constantly dieting and failing and dieting and failing, and they make it their entire personality when they're at home, and it's everything. And these kids are watching this. Now, that may not be dieting. That can be any addiction. It can be anything that is overly done So if we as parents aren't showing perseverance to our children, then they're never going to learn how to do that. We can't show perseverance without having an open, loving relationship with communication with our children and actually sharing with them maybe what some of the struggles are that we're persevering through. If we hide everything, because I know as men, we're supposed to hide all emotions. Moms are supposed to pretend as if there's never anything wrong when it comes to their kids. Like we have this expectation to hide these things. So I think if we're talking about perseverance in the family as parents, we can't teach them how to persevere if we're not open with them and sharing some of the things that we're working through. Of course, always being age appropriate. Like if we're struggling with finances, we don't need to share that. Our children don't need to worry about our finances. That's not age appropriate.
Right.
But if we're struggling with something else and we want to persevere through it and we want to push through it, sharing that with our children in an age appropriate way is the only way they're going to learn about our perseverance. Yeah, they'll see it if we reveal it. But if we never do, they're just going to think that everything comes easy.
Or they'll just start mimicking those behaviors. Like they'll just start like that routines, like those, life is just a bunch of trials and errors, and there's never any, like we always have this good that's hanging and dangling before us, but they're never going to achieve it. And like, I like seeing a parent that actually goes and does being consistent with that would allow, and being through the whole process, explain to the child like this is difficult, and I fail sometimes, and I think it's a good way for us to communicate with all kind of issues, whether it be physical or even spiritual, like, just in our lives as we're going through the difficult task of becoming like Jesus, we're going to fall short of that like all the time, and showing our children and I think that's a key. What you were saying, I think is really good, is just being open and honest with them, even from our perspective, showing them, we're putting a lot of pressure on you because we want you to have it. I always tell my teens this: I want you to have a little bit of a head start than I had when I was 32 and came to Christ. You guys are a lot younger, and you have now this. You're surrounded by all these people that really care about you and love Christ. I'm just trying to. I might put a little pressure on you, but I just want you to recognize it's a lot harder to overcome vices when you have them instilled in you than it is if you never instilled them to begin with.
So one of the things that I just kind of want to make sure we don't miss the other aspect of this is our children can only learn to persevere if they have something to persevere through.
That's true.
And so we talked about, in James 1:12, we talked about blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. You're talking about the spiritual. If we don't give them the trials, if we don't allow them to experience the failure, if we don't allow them to experience difficult times, they will never learn to persevere.
That's
they will
true.
only learn to look at us and wait for us to save them.
Yep.
That's might be cute at 2, or when that little girl at 5 looks up to you and is like, "Daddy."
Like my
But
hero.
man, like when they're 30, all of a sudden you're like, at some point,
Yeah, you need to be able to stand on your own 2 feet.
And I think wrapping it right back, kind of the way we began, is that as we think about what it means to make our kids, to give them those opportunities and to fail and to struggle and those kinds of things, it's going to require us as parents having perseverance as well to do that consistently.
Yep.
That can be, like in the case I look at my kids, there's certain things they have to do that come along regularly, such as the chores. We're going to persevere, and we're actually now starting to develop. I know we've talked a lot about this over the last year, but my wife even mentioned we're getting a rhythm. Like this is becoming part of how we function. And it's a lot less the complaining, a lot less of the trying to get out of it. We just got to get them to teach them to do it well.
Yeah.
But that, again, it's that regular. We have to have that perseverance. We had to be willing to, every time this comes along, to push them, to pull them, to encourage them, and to recognize that some of our kids, they'll do these things easily, and some of our kids are going to need a little bit more encouragement. They're going to need us to come alongside.
But the reminder being, the only way we know that is through getting to know our children.
Right.
Yep.
And having communication and actually working through these issues and allowing them to face the struggles and sharing our own struggles so that they understand what perseverance is in
Yep.
an age appropriate manner. I know I keep saying that.
No, it's good.
Well,
It's
gentlemen,
really
this is always a great conversation with you guys. I want to thank you for the time. You can find us on familiesofvirtue.com. Our podcast, Virtuous Roots, can be found on all major streaming platforms. God bless, and we'll talk to you next time.